I'm the VP of Growth for Hiatus, and we'll just dive right into it. Yeah, so analytics is the quarterback of any growth engine. I think I've worked for companies of all sizes, from like 10 people to 10,000, and especially at a large scale. I think the quality of your decisions is what drives success. At a smaller level, it's kind of more organic. You do this weird tactic that works, but for like larger companies, especially, I think if you read the data better than your competitor, that's essentially like how you win and you make better decisions. So a little bit of background about Hiatus. We're a personal finance consumer fintech. We help people manage bills, get better rates, plan their spending, and find better financial products. So when I joined, we were about 7 people. Then it went down to 5, and now we're up to 20 in 2.5 years. So we've been around for 7 years, raised a seed round of funding, and haven't raised funding since. So we're still very much a private company. I'm the VP of Growth, like I mentioned, and my role is to generally serve the well-being and growth plan for the business, especially at a smaller scale. I think everything's just super connected. Even customer service is really interested in engineering and marketing, because marketing brings how many customers they see every day, and marketing cares about engineering. So I think you need someone to just kind of play points and guide the entire thing. So I've taken a lot of that responsibility. I started in marketing, but just engineering cares about like revenue and all that. So I'm helping them drive like better product decisions that way and bring it all together. My team is approximately 4 people, and we have this really weird kaleidoscope of full-time contractors and third-party companies that all work together. But generally, I have around like 5 people on my team, so that's kind of the scope of what I'm working with. And these screenshots are just what our app does. It's just a all-in-one bill management platform, aggregates all your accounts, and you find like great products to best insurance, credit card offers, as well as managing your subscriptions. All right, so I'm just gonna ask the audience, what reports do you guys use, and what reports would you like to see? Because I think every business is obviously unique. So does anyone want to shout out what reports that they use on a day-to-day basis, just to get a sense of what you guys are all interested in? Like I know one person's really interested in a certain thing, but yeah, does anyone want to shout something out and I'll just repeat it? MAUs? Okay. Revenue? Okay. So for MAUs, do you track that with like Amplitude or like a CRM platform, or internally, like with your database? Gotcha. And then for social media analytics, do you use like a SaaS for that, or Lily? Okay. Cool. So we're a very advertising-driven marketing program, and a lot of our analytics are geared around that. So there's like incrementality, marketing mix models, cohort quality, and stuff like that. But hopefully this is useful. If anyone's interested in anything specific, then I can go into more detail, especially in the Q&A section. Are there any reports that you wish you had, or any analytics that you wish your company had? Okay. Well, hopefully there's some inspiration. Oh, yeah, go for it. So more like app analytics specifically over web, right? Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So what you just said is that like app is a little bit more challenging to understand subscription revenue from users, just due to challenges in understanding user privacy with scan. And that makes sense. Like we're seeing some stuff like, for example, Facebook returning unattributed values for their users, and it's a lot harder to measure customer quality. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of like creative endeavors you have to do, going away from deterministic to large scale tracking models like incrementality and media mix modeling. So totally understandable. But if we are also a web and app. So I started off doing web, and we do a lot of app now. So I've done both, and I've seen both sides of the equation. We're also a financial company. So there's a good presence for both. And we've leveraged web a lot just for user understanding, but we use app for growth and just raw user acquisition and quality. So I think every company can do a mixture of both. Like if you just need more user understanding, I think web is a great place to go to, like driving them to there first and downloading the app afterwards. But yeah. Yeah, so I generated a bunch of AI images because this is about analytics and I can't show actual data. So here's some engaging material, hopefully. But I think the key I learned this year is to really talk with your finance team, because every marketing team needs to understand strategic finance, where the company is going, where one of the biggest line items in the business is trying to do. Like marketing is a huge expenditure. So just finding out what the company financial goals are and just align them with marketing. And you'll see throughout the rest of this deck, like why that kind of integrates. So this is my grab bag of quick analytics. I split this into two sections. There's one for stuff I look at on a weekly basis, and there's stuff I look at maybe like a monthly or quarterly basis. So for the quick stuff, some examples I use is the recently acquired cohort quality, cohort churn, since we are a subscription product primarily, onboarding funnel metrics, in-app monetary action metrics. We also do in-app monetization, financial pacing reports. And my personal favorite is just a scratch pad of SQL queries. So I have like 50 to 60 just really badly written SQL queries that I like splice together into whatever reporting I need to talk with my database and understand the data insights. And I don't think anyone in this room probably writes SQL, but it's really good. And I've also made some like sample queries so you guys get an understanding of what that looks like. Okay, so one of my favorites, our finance team also uses this. It's the rolling net rev per user report. So on a dynamic basis, you can see what the trailing 7-day cohort quality is. So you can see if your cohort is making their payments, how much they're making their payments in the past 7 days. So you can keep track of the quality of your users. So there's a lot of different marketing channels you get turned on. And they all have different types of customers that come in. So this is a great way to get an understanding of that. So the SQL query I'm showing is just an example of what that can look like. I don't know how many of you guys do coding, but SQL is just one of the easiest ways to break into it. So you just set like what your start and end date is of the cohort you're tracking, and then you set some parameters. So you set the end date to whatever is the day that's 8 days ago, and it just automatically updates every single time you refresh a report for what the cohort quality is. Yeah, and then you just define your cohort based off those parameters. I think as you make decisions for the entire team across multiple departments, it's really important that you have an understanding of the data. Either you have a close relationship with the data team to know how they're pulling the data and how to ask them to pull the data. And ideally, you can do some of it yourself to get a better understanding of your users and like where the best opportunities are. So this is customer acquired churn. Same thing here. All I'm doing is taking the difference of when they canceled versus when they started their premium subscription, so I can get an idea of how long they're staying with the platform. This is all done programmatically and dynamically with SQL. And I'll just skip over the SQL sections if they're not that interesting. Like so far, is this tracking? Okay, I mean, maybe this like code doesn't make any sense, but hopefully if you start breaking into it, you'll see the patterns and like why it's useful. So for this specific one, I'm just finding the average number of days a user stays subscribed, and then I'm just seeing if they're staying longer or shorter, so it's very directional. This is something made by the finance team. So this is their pacing report on how we're spending versus how we're tracking. So for this one specifically, I'm looking at what our revenue target is for the month, how we're getting there, and also how much we're spending towards that budget goal. So if like budget is X, then we're like 50% of the way there. And by halfway through the month, you can track to see if your revenue target is meeting that or not. And it's good to just keep this like public as well, so stakeholders can understand where you are. I keep this pretty public between both at the C-suite level as well as people doing the actual campaign, so everyone can see like where we are and where we're headed and why if it's all coming together or not. Okay, so these are less frequent analytics that I do on a monthly or quarterly basis. So there's cohort monthly retention. If you have subscription models on a monthly basis, then this is what you would use for that. We have an internal media mix model we developed. We have internal incrementality impact analyses. We have elements of unit LTV, so figure out like how much user is worth in LTV and how that breaks down by elements. I have a product / lifecycle experiment log on which campaigns and experiments have done the most for growth. We have an updated audience intel report. We find customer segments by acquisition channel, as well as getting feedback from users. I think that one's really underrated, and it's hard to quantify how important that is, but it's really useful to guide anything. Okay, so for cohort monthly retention, I don't know if you guys have seen a lot of these before, but this is how you can see if people are falling off with a recently acquired cohort that you found. What I do here is I just define that audience. So this is the users acquired in February. I define that in SQL. Then I narrowed it down to the people who've created a subscription in Stripe, so you can actually pull your Stripe data into your database and then turn this into a report that you make custom made for your business. And this is obviously really important. Quick raise of hands. Who does a subscription product here? Do you guys use like an out of the box analytics tool, or do you make your own? And we do something similar. Like we have a Google Sheet as well, and there's like plugins where you can pull in your ad data as well as your CRM data. So what we track in there is your subscription monetization. So you see like the waterfall of each cohort, how long they're staying for. In that report, you're also seeing the first payment as well as the recurring payments. We also have in-app monetary actions, so how much revenue is being driven by that cohort just on an ongoing basis outside of subscriptions. And that's all pulled together in Google Sheets. We use Mode as our analytics platform to write custom SQL with. And that's how you can like pull the data to feed into the Google Sheet. Like Amplitude is also pretty good out of the box. But Mode is better for like custom lists of users, even to pull like customer segments for email. It's really useful to get that SQL query to pull that like list of users in your database. Yeah. All right. So for incrementality, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and it depends on what you're trying to do. So if you're running a campaign through Facebook, they'll do it for you. And I've heard anecdotally that they do a great job of actually doing a test control group. So that's totally fine. But if you're doing this yourself, whether through like TV or radio or something where you're doing some like out of home thing, it's really important to do an incrementality analysis. I attended a talk at MAU where they think incrementality is more important than marketing mix models. And as someone who's made a marketing mix model, that makes sense. So incrementality is a lot faster. You can get results really quickly depending on how you slice and dice it. But it's essentially very simple, actually. You find the smallest representative group, whether by geo, airing time, or test control group. So all you need is a control group and a test group. And then you isolate them apart through some way. Then you find the lift of running it against a test group. Like a lot of marketing programs are not going to get statistically significant if you have like just a high number of impressions. So the goal of how to split it up is that for a control group, you have maybe 100 impressions. And then for your test group, you have like 100 impressions. And then the goal is to just have like maybe 100% of what your control group is, so that you can significantly show a lift if something were to occur because it is sizable compared to a control group. And if you're doing it for like a smaller, more efficient test, you want to measure the standard deviation of like daily fluctuations. And then if you are 2 or 3 standard deviations above it, then you're going to show a lift. But if you also just have a lot of spend on your test control group with a lot of impressions relative to baseline, then you should see a lift no matter how fine tuned you want to be. So an example here is we ran a TV spot. So this is really easy, I think, to do, and it's really easy because you slice the audience into discrete parts that are very small because it's only on like a 4 p.m. or an 8 p.m. spot. So if you see a lot of customers arrive at that specific time, then that's how you can measure incrementality. And whatever the difference is how much incremental revenue you drove. And then you also find the standard deviation. If like you normally get a huge fluctuation during those times, and maybe a huge lift is just within normal bounds. And that's the reason why you want to get statistical if you're trying to do like a very small control test. But for larger tests, it's very obvious that something's happening there. So this is where it gets pretty crazy, and I'll try to go over this pretty fast. But we've partnered with a data science program at a local college, and this is what they got for us for marketing mix. This is if you're doing it for yourself, which is not going to happen for maybe like 99% of companies are not going to be wanting to do this. But what it actually looks like under the hood is you use Python to write code to feed it data and then run regression analysis to see which ones have the closest uh, fit for predicting what revenue is going to be. And I'll go pretty quickly through this, but any interest in going more in detail here, or I could just like go straight through this. All right. So this is what an output looks like. So the R squared is 0.83, which is pretty high, which shows there's a high degree of match between the test and actual data. For unit LTVs, this is also super important. I would just talk with finance what the drivers of revenue are. So for us, it's in-app actions and subscription revenue. So you figure out what the percentage of each are, and you model that out to see what sustainability looks like for users and strategically how profitable you want to be. So it's really important you have this in your spreadsheet somewhere. And then for lifecycle product marketing logs, this is a coded document I have to go through what that looks like, how to document things. So I order campaigns by priority, name, the type of campaign, if it's email, push, or whatever. The marketing segment, a preview, so just it just shows what it looks like. So at a glance, someone can see like what's supposed to look like in email. The status is in development or is it launched, how much of a large control group it is, as well as goals and KPIs. And this is some of my team that happened to be in New York City one day. Cool. Any questions?
Mentioned web for learning, mobile for growth at the start of it.
Yeah.
Can you give me some examples of what do you end up learning on web that's helping you with growth on mobile?
So for web, like we do a lot of acquisition through web, so we get a lot of rich data there, and we're able to track them like one-to-one and figure out what we want to learn. So it depends on what your goals are. Like I think user feedback is an important loop there. So for example, for like Facebook, you can see this is what the user quality is, and you acquire enough of them through web to understand their behavior, and once you have a significant pool of them, you can kind of approximate that for app. But what a lot of fintechs have done is that they have both a web and an app presence. So what they'll do is they'll have a web destination, but somewhere along the user journey, they'll actually drive to app afterwards. So that they have the best of both worlds. Like a lot of them do that. Like they have like 5 screens on web. So they have the customer information. They subscribe through web, avoiding some in-app fees, and then they drive them to app afterwards, where the higher engagement is and the higher LTV is.
Do you feel like there's anything missing in your data analytics, or do you feel like you have everything covered at
So we're unique in the sense that I knew SQL starting into this job, so I was like 1 foot into the analytics team already, and I talk, and we're a small company, so I talk with the engineering team almost every day. And the answer is we don't have all the information, but I have a good understanding of how to acquire anything we need. I think the hard part for us is getting surveys and interviews from users on qualitative feedback. When it comes to quantitative stuff and in-app actions, you can track close to anything if it's first-party data. So is there anything specific that you think is missing that maybe? Yeah, so the question is how you do multi-touch attribution, like if it's not last click, how you attribute before that point, right? So that's where marketing mix models are really useful. So on like a macro level, you can see if you spent this much on this channel over this period of time, you see what the outcome is. So you can get an understanding of like what the coefficient or what the impact of a certain uh, like points in your marketing program. Like if you did this factor, this is what the impact is of doing this thing. And it's really important, I think, for larger brands. You've got like Nielsen for this, for large advertisers like McDonald's, where there's a ton of different like touch points, but then they have panel studies that interview users and figure out like why they do what they do. And there's a lot of like market research behind it. For the direct to consumer route, I would do incrementality analysis or marketing mix. I think one of those two are really useful. Also, surveys are really underrated. I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough for attribution, but just putting a survey in your app and people are saying they're doing this like this first touch point a lot, then that can show a lot. Specifically for out of home, radio, TV, that's where it becomes really useful to measure those first touch points before they do like a last click touch point in like a paid search ad or something.